Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Brad Dixon. Coach Dixon is the PE teacher, along with head football and boys track coach. He is a speed and strength coordinator at Central High School in Camp Point, Illinois. He is a TFC contributor and was the 2012 and 2018 KHQA Awards Week Football Coach of the Year. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Hey, thanks you. Appreciate being on. Listened to a bunch of these over the last year or so. So it's definitely humbling to be actually on here.
Well, thanks for listening. I appreciate it, especially coaches. That tells me that hopefully the guests are giving the coaches what they need to maybe pick up some information on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a good group of guys you get on here, and you get guys from lots of different areas. So that makes it even better.
Well, I've been pretty excited about doing this one is because you're at a small school, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm in West Central Missouri. We're south of Kansas City, about an hour. I think you got, a couple hundred students in your high school, maybe 240, something like that?
Yeah, right around that. It kind of fluctuates. I think we're at 241 or 2 at this point. So, yeah, that's about where we've been. I think when I came in 2007, we were at 275, and we maybe been down as low as 235, but we've kind of been in that 235 to 245 range now for quite a while.
So you have a different perspective than some of these guys because they have what could be an unlimited amount of resources and athletes. So teaching and coaching in a small school, how are you able to take advantage of the athletes given to you?
Yeah, I always say that I'm pretty fortunate because I do all the strength and conditioning. I'm the head football coach and the head track coach. And I work with all the other sport programs. So if somebody screwed up, I don't have anyone else to blame but myself. So that's good and bad, but it's pretty awesome because I get to work with about 125 of our athletes every single day. And then I get to coach around 50 of them in football. And then when track season rolls around, I get about 25 to 30 boys and girls. So I get to dabble in a lot of stuff. I coach basketball as well for about 14 years. I gave that up around 2016, and I've been officiating basketball. So I've tried to stay involved in a lot of different stuff, being at a small school. But, we preach a lot of multi-sport athletes. So as kind of the guy that's organizing the workouts and such, it's kind of my job to make sure that kids are getting the training they need and being able to play multiple sports without being fatigued and not feel their best. So it's definitely a hard job, but it's one that is pretty awesome because I don't have to answer to a whole bunch of different people and organize around a bunch of different stuff.
Well, you made a pretty interesting point in there that I don't know everybody thinks about, but if your numbers decline and you're involved in so many different things, it possibly could be a direct reflection on how you're handling the kids. So to have your numbers be good every year, it's a testament to what job you're doing there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it might be leveling out a little bit. I just read today that in Illinois we went from 400 and maybe 97 11-man football teams to 501 this year, and we had been declining, and 8-man actually lost a couple programs. I think they're at 27. So numbers maybe hopefully are leveling out, but obviously small school football around the country has been tough. We've been able to sustain somewhere between 45 and 55 athletes now for about 17 years that I've been here at the 1A level. And, first thing I like to do when we play an opponent is to look at the film, take a look at the roster and see how many two-way players they have, because here we try to play as many one-way guys as we can. I call them 1.5-way players. They might play both sides of the ball, but we try not to play them the entire game. And so we'll play some teams that start 10 and 11 guys both ways, but we may only start 3 or 4 that play. Last year we had 2 that predominantly played both ways, and we substituted everybody else. So, to be able to do that at the 1A level is an advantage before we ever kick off.
Yeah, now talking about the logistics in there, I know from the area I'm in, we've watched a lot of schools go to 8-man. So what that's done is that's created huge travel times. Has that done that for you guys to go find an 11-man team? Or are you seeing bus rides starting to get up into the 1.5, 2-hour range?
Back in 2011, we were co-oping with another school, so we were 2A. And that year we played 4 or 5 Saturday games. We had about 4 trips that were 4 hours plus. But since 2012, we've been in what's called the WIVC, or the Western Illinois Valley Conference, 2 divisions, 12 teams. It's been pretty steady. In our division, most of our games are within 45 minutes. We have 2 that are within 20. And then once we get out of division, maybe the furthest is an hour and a half. So we've been pretty fortunate. We've had a few teams drop out here or there where we've picked up games. We were able to pick up a bigger rival school about 30 minutes away back in 2014, which ended up in overtime and us making a field goal. So we've been kind of immune to that a little bit, but that isn't the norm, because a few years ago, Illinois looked at districts and actually passed the district model. And then before it ever took effect, it was reversed because of some rivalry situations. And they were going to make the first 2 games of the schedule not count. You could play whoever you wanted. And so there's a lot of logistical things. It made sense for scheduling, but there were a lot of other issues there. And so they kind of got rid of it. And I think that same article I read today had maybe 7 schools that were still looking for games right now. But Missouri's really close. So I think we've got a lot of teams playing in Missouri. But I hope it seems like it's leveling out a little bit, and hopefully we can reverse the trend, heading back and getting, football is that sport where those tweener kids that really can't play anything else can come out, and if they're hard-nosed and they'll work hard, there's a spot for them in football where there might not be a spot for them in basketball or baseball or golf, or, some of those that are super technical. So that's what I love about football, just because of the sheer numbers and impact you're able to have on that number of kids.
I've talked about it with our coaches before. You're probably in a little bit different situation than some of them, because you could drop numbers really quick. So kids are a commodity. You have to take everybody that you can get to come out and try to make an athlete out of them. How do you bring up some of the younger, weaker guys while keeping your top level guys advancing?
Yeah, I think it starts with like this summer, for example. We have an older group and a younger group. So our older group are our juniors and seniors, and some select sophomores that are kind of ahead of the game. And so they train together. And then our freshmen and some of our other sophomores train together. And our freshmen are incoming. It could be an incoming sophomore. We have an incoming junior that's never played before. They're in their own pace of learning how to train and different things. So we group them together like that. I think that helps. They don't get lost in the shuffle. They understand that they matter. And then when we start football, this is something that I understand it happens a lot at the big schools, but at a small school level, we actually divide our practices up. So, there's no more 2-a-days for the players in Illinois, or pretty much any state, I would say, anymore. But we're limited on what we can do. And so what we'll do is we'll take our roster and we'll figure out, whether that's 22 and 25 or 25 and 25, or we'll divide it in half. And we'll say, these are the guys right now that we think are going to help us with varsity. And we'll practice them first in the morning, early 6 to 9-ish, sometimes 7 to 9, depending on where we're at in that schedule. And then, we'll go fast and we'll be ahead of the game there. And then we'll take about an hour break. The coaches will, and then the young kids will come in. And so for the coaches, it's 2-a-days. But when we start practice, we those 25, 24 guys, you got these freshmen that might be a little scared. They don't want to be in the same group with a varsity guy, or, even in little drills, could be a linebacker drill, running back drill, whatever the scenario is, people don't want to look dumb. And so we like to divide up. And so for the first 7 days or 6 days, we're completely separate. And so I think that's a huge deal, because those kids are getting coached by the varsity coaches. They're not just, standing in the back. They're not just stuck on some other field. We really do our best to coach, and we slow it way down for them. And we go as slow as we need to, because the varsity is in and out. They're done already. We've done what we needed to do there, and we can spend that extra time with those young kids. And coaches get here at 6 a.m. and we leave at about 1 p.m., which, as a sprint-based football coach, it's really the only time that we really kind of grind that way. But we do it for the kids, and we do it for the development at the very beginning of the year. And I think it gets us off on the right foot. Kids get a little bit of confidence in those younger levels, and our varsity guys are able to really, really go. And we really liked it. And it was really one of those fortunate things that came out of having to relook at our model after this after the state said we couldn't do 2 days anymore, and how were we going to break it down and make sure we were getting the quality of reps. And it's something we've been doing, I think, since 2014 or 15, and we've really, really liked it.
Now, going back to what you said in there about some of the freshmen, some of the younger guys maybe being a little scared, hard to throw them in with some varsity and get the looks you want. Across the country, it seems like Little League football has taken off. It's a big deal. It's like any other competitive sport. Do you think maybe we're overexposing those kids to big hits at a young age, and that's affecting football as we see it now at the high school level?
I mean, I think so. In some cases, I think it depends who's running it. We do have junior high football. We don't do JFL. We don't play any JFL teams either. And there's nothing wrong with good JFL programs, but sometimes what you get is an overzealous parent that's all focused on winning, and they've already decided, who the stars are going to be and who's going to get the ball at every snap and who's going to stand on the sideline. And, some schools will put the biggest guy in the backfield and just run toss left and toss right and, do all those things. They'll blitz every down, try to get a tackle for loss and not teach their guys anything about reading. But we're pretty lucky that we've got a junior high coach here, and we let our sixth graders practice. They can't play in any games. And then our seventh and eighth grade, and not becoming, our numbers are good. We'd love to play 2 games, but locally our numbers are down. And so we only play really 1 game a night. And sometimes we'll play that extra quarter. So we try to find 22 starters. We teach them our base stuff. We don't let them blitz. And, they blitz it at situations that are normal. We put the right guys in the backfield who we think is going to be there. We try to figure out, who could potentially play quarterback. And we've really been fortunate to get anywhere between 11 and 20 freshmen out every year because I think we take that approach at that level. But we got also junior high baseball going on at the same time, and we don't discourage any of those kids. Our junior high baseball coach, if he wasn't doing baseball, would be on our football staff. He pushes tons of kids. Our first second place in 2018, our starting quarterback for 3 years was a baseball player. He didn't even play junior high football. Our current quarterback that's going to start for his 3rd season didn't play football until his 8th grade year, and he broke his arm in the first half of the first game. So we just want the kids to play stuff. There's a lot of schools in our area that'll have great JFL numbers, and then none of them ever can field freshmen. So we're always able to play freshman games. We end up having to travel to some of the bigger schools around because I don't think we burnt kids out. We haven't ran kids off. And I think that's huge because, if you start with 15 a class, then you're going to get down to 8 or 9. If you start with 11, you're going to be down to 6. And so if we can start with 15 to 20 when they're younger, and we understand some kids are going to make different choices and things, our goal is always 15 a class if we can get it. I think this year we're going to have 13 seniors, which is great. And so, that's the approach we take. We've never had a great junior high record, but I always ask the kids what their record is in junior high, and none of them remember it. I don't remember what our JV records are. I couldn't tell you what I know, we probably lost 1 or 2 games at the JV level, but I don't remember that stuff. That's not what we focus on at those levels, and I think that's really helped us continue to maintain success at those upper levels.
I've watched quite a few of your YouTube videos, different things you've put out. You've put out an amazing amount of stuff that's really high quality. But you talked about creating an athlete focus so all coaches can benefit. So helping the athletes across your school so that the basketball coach can benefit, the track coach can benefit, not just getting specific and trying to rob your athletes and make them better. How are you able to get everybody on board and get the coaches to kind of understand what you're trying to do?
Well, I wasn't always there. I was that guy before we had strength and conditioning as part of our school day. I was that guy that expected our football guys to come in at 6 a.m. if they played basketball. And I wouldn't care if they had a game that night on the road and they got home at 11, I expected them to be in at 6 or 6:30. And if the weight card called for 3 sets of 10 at whatever percentage and they were sore, it didn't matter. You'll tough it out. And I was even coaching basketball, and one time after Christmas, one of our best players, it was the first game, and he decided he was going to start working out really hard. And some of it was the fact that he had taken some time off, but he was super sore. And I remember our basketball coach looking at me and saying, "No, our guys can't move. They're so sore from lifting that they can't even move up and down the floor." And it was, I mean, he was right. Whether that was all my fault or some of the players or whatever, but it was the reality. And I never want our players to feel like what we're doing in strength conditioning is affecting their play in their sport. And I definitely don't want their coaches to think that. So we try super hard. Obviously, football is pretty easy because the schedule is set. Basketball, depending on, obviously, in Illinois, most of the time boys play on Tuesdays and Fridays. Girls play on Mondays and Wednesdays. Baseball's all over the place, so I'm always talking to guys who are pitching or not pitching and things like that. And I know some people would say, well, anyone can do anything, and you're probably right. But if we're athlete centered and we're sports centered, I mean, the number one thing is the kid in that sport, and whatever I can do to make them feel like they can be successful. I mean, some guys, I'll say, hey, let's go a little bit lighter. No, coach, I feel like I do better if I train this on this day or whatever. And we work through it. We just try to have an open line of communication. We don't ever, the only time we really get much volume in is in the summer. And that's even tough to do because some of our kids are playing everything at the same time. So we just accept small gains over time. We really hone in on jump numbers and sprint numbers. And those are things that kind of measure their CNS recovery. And I know if something that we're doing or where they're at in their season is destroying them, we accept that. And I'll tell the kids, hey, we're going to train more acceleration right now just because of where you guys are at in your season. And then in the weight room, we'll have in-season stuff and out-of-season stuff based on, where the kid's at and what modifications to the exercises that they're doing. And so we try to do all those things to the best of our ability. And like I said, I want our guys to be able to perform and stay injury-free. And sometimes I know we err on the side of doing less than we probably can, but we're okay with that over a 4-year time. And I figure if our kids train, we give them 4th of July week off, 2 weeks for Christmas, and 1 week in August. And if our guys train every other week, that's 48 weeks out of the year. And so we can accept those gains over that 48 weeks and not have to chase something, during their season.
So what put you on this path? I mean, you talked about sprint-based football, kind of where you come from, what you think about it now. Was there was there something that kind of triggered, hey, I need to make a change in what I'm doing if we're going to be successful, or was it just a gradual move into this?
I'd say there's probably around 4 things that I can think that and it took me a long time. I think it really, part of my problem was I took over in 2011. I'd been here since 2007. They had went through, I was an assistant then. I think we were on our, 6th head coach in 7 years. Program had only been in the playoffs once. They were coming off of 1-8. We went 3-6 that first year. And then our principal took over for 3 years, went 5-4, 7-2, 8-3. And then I took over then in my first year and we were 9-0. We had a round of 3 9-0s in a row. We went second round, semifinals, quarterfinals, semifinals. Those are my first 4 years. We were 44-5. So when you're winning that many games, that's why I tell people, there's a lot of ways to win. We were winning it, doing a lot of things that we don't do now at all. And then we kind of hit a lull where we had some more injuries. We were 5-5, 7-3, 8-2. Not terrible records. We were still going to the playoffs, but just not the caliber of football that I thought we could play. We also hired, so that was kind of what took me a while. And in that time, we also hired a guy to be our track coach that helped me with football. And he bought a timing system, and he was always all about speed. And of course, I was still a weight room guy. He was doing triphasic, and he was going to some of these TFCs before I even knew what they were. And he was telling me things, and I really didn't buy into it. He would kind of do, back then it was right before RPR, it was Douglas Heels be activated. He would do that to these kids, and I just kind of let him do his thing. And then we had the track opening, and I had just quit basketball, and I'm like, I just can't. And he goes, man, I just need somebody to help And he goes, I'll do the paperwork and such. I just need, so I agreed to it. And I went to my first track meet in shorts like I did in football, froze my butt off. There's so much standing around, and then started coaching it. And I thought, man, if I train these track guys like I do football, we're going to be slow as hell. And so that happened. And then somehow I got onto Tony Holler through my assistant coach, Mike Bickerman. And that led me to reading Tony's article about new school ideas for old school football coaches in 2017. And so it's all kind of working together here. I've been beating the head with speed. We've had a lot of injuries. I started coaching track, and then this comes, and I kind of put it on the back burner because this was literally late July, early August. I mean, I think camp was over for us, and we were getting ready to start practice. I sent it to my assistant coaches and said, "This is pretty good stuff," and that's kind of where we left it. And so in 2017, then I think we were setting at 2-2. And again, we'd had some guys beat up, and we decided, you know what? Let's take the pads off one day a week. Let's take pads off Tuesday. Let's only wear them Wednesday. And we started kind of worrying more about the recovery, and we went on and we reeled off like 7 straight victories. End up getting beat in the last 20 seconds of the second round on a failed 2-point conversion. But things kind of turned around. The guys seemed a lot more fresh. We had some big wins. And so we kind of dipped our toes into it then. So then in the off season of 2018, we just went all in on it. And I reached out to Tony and said, you know, here's what I'm thinking. And I put it on a few of my presentations, our direct messages, you know, what do you think? And he's like, you know, just remember the principles, build your own house, pretty much, which is in typical Tony fashion. I was expecting him to say, do this, don't do this, do this, do that, cross that out, no, yes. And it was pretty much, yeah, it's the principles seem solid. Just remember, you know, if you remember the principles, everything else will fall into place. So we kind of went into it, you know, and I tell coaches, because, you know, the biggest question I get is A, how do you convince your assistants or your head coach? Hey, I love it. My head coach is old school. How do you convince your AD? How do you convince your community? We had already built some street credibility. I mean, we'd won a lot of games doing it the old way. I was in my, I think, 10th year overall at the school. And so we had some credibility, but we still caught some flack because we were getting off the practice field early. The guys weren't in pads, you know, and if you start losing, then, you know, our first big game of that year in 2018, we were 5-0. We were playing a 3A team. They ran all over us. They beat us 41 to maybe 24, and we couldn't stop them. And then it kind of, you know, creeps in. Oh, well, are we tough enough? Kind of, you know, all that kind of stuff. And we end up regrouping, obviously, and playing for the state championship. And, you know, since then we've been able to stay healthy, and we've been in, you know, we played much better. We played a powerhouse Lena Winslow this year and gave him a hell of a game, and you know, just couldn't get it done. But, you know, it was a series of those moments, and, you know, just a rash of injury and I guess being stagnant that really kind of led me in that direction. And then that whole track mindset, all that kind of together, and obviously Coach Holler putting out good content and really kind of driving it forward was how we got to this point.
Now, you kind of touched on it there. I know in some of your presentations you talked about Coach Holler talking about everybody wants the answers, but in most cases they're either not ready for the answers or you just don't have the answers. So building your own house, you have to see what works for you. What works for you in Camp Point is not going to work for somebody in another part of the country. So now you've had enough time to do that. You're getting pretty confident in what you're doing. How long did it take for you to just know this is the way we're always going to do it?
I think when guys stay healthy, I think there's nothing worse than a kid not being able to play due to some, especially a practice injury. You know, sometimes things happen in a game, and we obviously nothing prevents. I mean, there's no, if there was a tried and true, you know, if you do this 100%, your guys will stay healthy. But we had a year where in one game in 2015, in the first half, we had a dislocated knee, an AC joint, and a broken collarbone, you know, and it's like, dang. And that was all in a half. And, you know, since we've got into sprint-based football, you know, knock on wood, we had an MCL that eventually turned into an ACL. We've had a few high ankle sprains, and that's really about it. our guys really haven't missed many games, and I chalk it up to we're trying to play as many guys as we can. So our opportunity for injury is less. If a guy is playing 60 snaps versus 120 snaps, he doesn't have as many opportunities to be injured. He's also much more fresh. So his body is not in this constant state of fatigue. We worry about their recovery, so we don't bring them in on the weekends. We don't spend all week beating them up in all these different scenarios. We try to create drills that are specific to what we need. We don't just do random toughness drills or whatever people do to try to build a tougher foot. We look at film from an objective standpoint and say, okay, what happened here? And not just say, well, so-and-so's getting his you-know-what kicked. That's the common phrase. And the next thing is he's not tough enough. He's not strong enough, blah, 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 blah. So then we go into practice and we go king of the board. We do all these other drills where it's just this constant. But the reality was maybe his stance wasn't good. Maybe his first step was too long. Maybe his hips were up instead, whatever, his hands were in the wrong spot. He was too wide. His base, there's so many other technical things. Or maybe he's just so dang fatigued at the end of the game that he physically couldn't do it. Or because practice tore him up all week or whatever. So, there's so many other things that are there that should be the focus as opposed to kind of these obscure things that you could literally sit in the stands and hear, oh, geez, did you see him? He just got blown up there, and that's another reason I got rid of coaches meetings on the weekends. I mean, I've been a part of a lot of coaches meetings, and the first half hour is all about, this kid can't do this and this kid can't do this. And there's no way we'll ever be able to do this. And this guy sucks and blah, and we spend this whole time with all these issues and complaints and no one brings solutions. And so you just sit around and get depressed about whatever the scenario is, as opposed to doing your work at home, focusing on the game plan and what we need to do to get better. And I think some coaches, that's one of the things they can't get rid of. They need to meet on the weekends, and that's fine. I tell coaches, you can, like you just said, you can't take what I do. You've got to figure out what you can accept. Can you accept your guys having a 10-minute break where they're standing over there drinking water and shooting the breeze because you're transitioning from an offensive period of practice to a defensive period of practice, treating it like a halftime and giving the kids a little extra opportunity to recover. Some coaches can't handle that. There's no way they could do that they could stand there and let their kids do that. I get it. For us, I'm okay with that because I want that next segment when we come back to be really good. And so you've got to figure out what your kind of non-negotiables are. We have to bring them in on Saturday morning, or there's no way we could not wear pads on Tuesday. I mean, there's just different things that coaches have, that we're okay with because we're performance-based and we're going to do as minimum as we think we need to make sure our guys, and I always put like the pie on my presentations, and in that pie is home life, work, school, social media, relationships, all of those things, and practice. So you put all that in there, and then there's a slice there for the game. And if that slice is about an eighth of an inch thick, then they're not going to perform very well. We can't control a lot of these other things. We can talk about going to bed, turning your phone off, all those things. We can't control if they're in honors level classes, but we can control practice. So if practice is taking half the pie every week and we don't have enough to play, then we can dial back that part of it so that we have more when we play, because we don't have this infinite amount of energy. And I feel like for so long we were just surviving Friday nights instead of thriving on Friday nights. And so we're trying to give our kids the best situation to be as fresh as they can, because a happy, healthy, fresh athlete, maybe not as trained as some of the other teams that have practiced for 2.5 hours, is going to have, in my opinion, a better chance to be successful than some kid that's been ran into the ground and drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled, who's not in their best state of mind on Friday.
Moving into this style of coaching, it required you, it sounds like, to become a better coach. And maybe that's what some people may be scared of. Do you feel like you had to really evaluate you as a coach and everything you do to get it top tier so that you could cut the time down from the kids?
Oh yeah, I mean, you become an essentialist, and that's something that Tony's talked about, and he encouraged me to read that book. People think, and from the outside, it seems lazy, So we have a homeroom at the end of the day. Our kids can get out of class at 2:30. We can be hopefully on the field by 2:45. We can be starting between 2:45 and 3. We're trying to get off the field at 4:30. And to an outsider, well, geez, those guys are already leaving. It's hard to get what you need to get in and get off in an hour and a half. That is not an easy thing. When you look at a practice plan and you've only got 90 minutes or 100 minutes or whatever it is, and you need to get what you need to get in, that's a difficult thing to do. I mean, it's easy to just say, okay, we're going to go till 5 or 5:30, depending on however long we need to go. Well, then that in my opinion, is lazy. And so we try to figure out, and we're still getting better at this. Last year, we got a lot better from progressing our drills. And Andy Ryland with USA Football really kind of got me to think about this. If we are doing a drill week 1 of camp, and then we're still doing that drill in week 9, something happened. Either it was way too advanced in week 1, or it's a time waster in week 9. Now, I'm not saying you can't do the same version of that drill, but you have to progress that drill either with a time component, an intensity component, a read component, something, a blocker component. There's got to be another level to that. And those drills need to reflect what you're actually seeing on the field. Like today, this was our first day in helmets. We started with our athletes on both knees, working on the basics of just a hawk tackle. I mean, that was where we started. If we're doing that drill in week 9, then we're either a bad football team, a bad set of coaches, or I don't know what we are. We're wasting a lot of time. And so last year we did a good job of getting away from tackling stations or a circuit. We used to, each week we would do a takeaway circuit and a tackling circuit, and all the groups would rotate through 4 stations. And that is fine to teach tracking, basics of tackling. But by weeks 9, 10, 11, the D-line needs to be doing things, when the D-line needs to be doing different tackling things than the DBs. The DBs that aren't very big are going to tackle a little bit different than the DBs that are bigger. The outside linebackers are going to use a little bit better, different technique on the edge than our downhill linebackers. And so we really got better at progressing within our group time, creating segments for tackling, but doing it inside of our group time and leaving the position coaches responsible and not having to have this big circuit because we had progressed out of that. We didn't need to come back to that. And you do the same thing with 7-on-7 or any of your other inside run stuff. You eventually, there's some staples that stay, but I'm not a big everyday drill guy. Once we get our stance figured out, I don't need to do stances again. Once we get our basic reads figured out, I don't need to do reads again. It needs to be based upon what we see on the field or don't see, what are our opponents going to do to us, any weird things that we might see, and that's going to dictate weekly what we're specifically going to do. And we're not just going to have this menu of everyday drills and say, okay, we need to do some read drills. Well, here's the ones we've been doing all year. In my opinion, that's, it's kind of like the beginning of what we talked about at the beginning of practice. Our older guys have done that for 4 years, and if we're still doing that same thing, we're not making them any better. And all we're doing is wasting time.
So the importance of tracking and evaluating what's working has to become kind of everybody's job. You've got to have your assistants saying, hey, this is working well. We need to move on to something else. So how do you kind of manage keeping track of where everything is?
Yeah, I'll create something in my head, which will be a variation or another layer of a drill, and it'll suck. Whether it's because some of it is logistics. Maybe logistically, I've got 12 inside linebackers and it just doesn't work. Maybe what I drew up in my head. So you got to be willing to have failures in that regard. I think I'm very fortunate that I have 2 guys. So, we're a small school. We've coached some years with only 4 guys. Last year we had 5.5-ish, 6. We had a guy on game night, which was a lot better. But 2 of the guys, my offensive coordinator, I call the defense. He's been here. This is my 17th year. He quarterbacked the only other playoff team before we started this run of 14 years. So he's been calling the offense now for a long time. He's been here 16 years. My main other O-line, D-line coach has been here for 14. So the three of us have been together for that long, and we kind of understand. And every year, we're making, different little changes, because generally what will happen is, we'll have our base stuff and it works really well, and then it doesn't. And then someone exposed us in some aspect of our technique, our read, or whatever our scenario is, and we'll have to come up with an answer. And so then, okay, now we normally, we were working gun counter today, just the basics of how our inside, well, for us, it's a 3-3, our inside six guys play it. Well, some teams, the center blocks back. Well, that's a whole different scheme on how we need to play it. And more teams are doing that with the center. A lot of teams didn't. So that needs to be something that we're upfront about, not just in week 10 when we see that again. Last year, we were really good at playing against tight end trips, tray, whatever you want to call it, week 1. And then we didn't really see it again and kind of got away from it. And then, bam, a team that hadn't showed it all year came out in week 7, and it gave us all kinds of fits. Our guys couldn't get lined up right. We won the game, but we gave up more yards. We didn't give up maybe 60 points all year, 70 points. We gave up 30 in that game, or 28. And it was because, as coaches, we had the stuff in, but we hadn't reviewed it. We hadn't continued to build upon it. And, a team did it, and we didn't have the answers to it. And our guys didn't understand it. And so we vowed to make some changes there. So we're always evaluating how we're teaching it, when to visit things, because, we might see 3 wing T teams weeks 1, 2, and 3, but then we're going to see a really good spread team week 4. If we wait till week 4 to really talk about how we're going to defend some of that stuff, we're going to be in trouble. So it is a nuance of trying to figure out, and it's always a work in progress. And, we screw up stuff all the time, and we just tell the kids, hey, that was, we got through that game and they were happy to survive. I think it was week 7. We were 6-0, and we had rolled through everyone. And I took it. It was on me. Our guys were good, and they just were confused on where to line up, where to fit into the run game to have that extra gap. And that was all on me and all on us as coaches. And we had to take it, and we got better for it. And, went on and won, the next 6 or 7 games and had maybe 5 shutouts.
Well, that kind of builds on something I'd heard you talk about. It really doesn't matter what you know, and it doesn't matter what your coaches know. It matters what your kids can understand and what your kids can execute. So trying to give them the pieces they're going to need to carry through the season, I would imagine, takes quite a bit of planning as you look out ahead from summer going into what will eventually, hopefully, be the playoffs.
Yeah, Coach Holler talks about it, and I think Eric Korn talked about it. You have to be uncomfortable with what you've done leading into week 1. You just got to kind of accept it, that you're not there physically, and you're not going to be there scheme-wise. You got to have your base stuff in. You got to have a few answers for the things that you might see. You got to have some stuff on 3rd and long. You got to have some stuff on short yardage stuff, some red zone. But it really boils down to, we got to get really good at our base stuff. We always say, when, if it's 4th and 3 on offense, who are we running behind, and what, who's our best guy to get the balls to, and so it's that 80-20, and I'm sure you've seen that in some of our presentations, that the Pareto principle, that 80% of our success comes from 20% of our work. And so it works out, and it's crazy how statistics work. My offensive coordinator is the upper level math teacher, and I had him do it again last year. And it's not something that we're at that 80%, but we've got about 8 top schemes that we run in plays, and some of them are blocked the exact same. But that made up 80% of our yards and 80% of our play calls. And it was 20%. We had, I think, it was 20% of our play calls. We had like 40 different unique, sometimes it's a one-off play here or there. And those were our most ran plays, and it was 80% of our yards. But then, as my offensive coordinator says, you can't neglect the 20%, because the 20% got us to the state championship game. Because in the quarterfinals, we were at 4th and 3, and the team we were playing was really good. They're a crossover in our league, Greenfield. We hadn't played them in the regular season. We got down 12-0. So we're down 12-6 at this point in the 3rd or early 4th quarter. and they stacked the box. We ran no play. We saw what they were in, called out a pass play that was the exact one we needed for a 2 deep look, and we scored a touchdown on 4th and 3 from about 30 yards out. And it was in that 20%. We may only run that play 15 times a year, but we needed it. Our kids understood it. They knew that in a situation, if we saw 2 high safeties, 9 guys in the box, this was the play we were going to run. So it wasn't something that we spent tons and tons of time on, but it was something that our kids knew, and it was in that 20%. I feel like some coaches, when you get in the gun, man, and I love to watch college football and all that stuff's great, and RPOs, and man, you turn on, you're like, wow, that seems I could put that in. Ooh, I like that look. We could put that in. Oh, we could motion that guy. Next thing you know, you've got this notepad over there, and you're like, oh man, these guys, that's all good stuff, but why not try to put some of that stuff in? Okay, so then you're trying to put that stuff in, and next thing you know, it's like, what are you actually? If someone said, what do you run? Are you a gun counter team? Are you a zone team? What is your basic stuff? Teams know that we're gonna run base blocking, we're gonna run double dive, and we're gonna run buck sweep, we're gonna run jet, and we're gonna run those handful of plays. And we're gonna do it out of the double wing probably 90% of the time, and we're gonna throw the ball about 9% of the time, and that's just kind of who we are. And our kids have bought into that. And, we add wrinkles in as the year goes on, but we want to make sure we're really good. And then we just, like today, it was only our belly and option series, which is our basic stuff. And we did it the entire time today to really get the footwork and that stuff started. So
to build a team like you said you have to build a physical kid, a physical athlete, and you have to have speed on top of that. So mixing the weight room, mixing everything you do in max effort, sprinting, is that where you find that you're getting the advantage over the teams you play?
Yeah, I mean, when we only focused on the weight room, we were generally losing, not at the line of scrimmage, we were losing in space. We had a great rival in our in the South Division, Carrollton. They had beat us in the playoffs 2 or 3 times, once in the semifinals. Once in the second round. They had 2 runner-ups. In fact, in 2021, we beat them in week 1. We came all the way back, beat them in the 4th. They ended up going on and getting second. And they used to always be faster than us. And then we kind of turned the tables, and then we were faster than them. And, if we can get our guys to the edge in the wing T, and I mean, people always talk about, we're going to make teams defend the entire field. And I understand that, but there's something to be said about these teams that put 9 guys in the box. You get to yard 6, you're gone, because there is nobody there. And we see so many junk defenses that we get a lot of these big plays because teams don't play fundamentally sound. And so you've got to be physical. I mean, that you have to be. I think that comes from being rested. It comes from knowing your job. It comes from technique. It doesn't come from doing 1,000 bear crawls. It just comes from guys caring about the guy next to them, understanding where they're going, understanding their technique, coaches putting them in the right spots. I mean, I think, as coaches, sometimes we see something on paper, or, this play worked the week before. But, I mean, a lot of times our guards are 185 pounds. And if we have a 300-pound D tackle and a head up on that guard, we're probably not going to run a ton of our area stuff if he can't block him one-on-one. But I'll tell you what we can do is we can down block the hell out of him. We can pull that guard and we can run buck or whatever, or we can double him. We've got all kinds of different case in point. We played a Jacksonville route team that was ranked in state. I think it was week 4. They were undefeated. The game before, they had this 6'5", probably 200-pound basketball player at nose. And he would swim the center, and he had probably 12 tackles for loss in 2 games. So the first quarter, we literally triple teamed him. We didn't block the center or block the middle linebacker. And by the second quarter, he had taken himself out. He was on a knee. He had his hand. He was so mad that we were doubling and tripling, but that our center was going to need help. And he was a really good center. He was honorable mention All-State, but this dude was a dude. But he wasn't a dude when we double and tripled him. So, yeah, we took our 4 yards. We didn't block the middle linebacker. But that guy, I don't know if he made a tackle in the entire game. And by the second half, he was checked out. and that was it. I mean, we had to do that coaching wise. You've got to put your guys in the right situation, and we did, and we were driving them out. To me, that's part of being physical. It's having the right scheme. It's having them in the right spot. And then the speed is just what we didn't have. We were that we want big plays. We want to play the 15 yards or more. If we can get 6 of those in a game, we have a great chance of winning. Our statistics show that. Obviously, there's a time we're going to go slow, but there's also a time we're going to do a ton of hurry up stuff. And so that's part of subbing out. We'll try to run 9 backs. I think last year we had 11 guys carry the ball for 150 or more yards. So that's something else we do in our scheme that keeps our guys quote unquote physical because we keep them fresh. But you got to figure out the right mix. We try to stay in that speed power range during the season. We hit strength with our guys that aren't in some sports during the off season. We hit it in the summer. We just got off a little bit before 4th of July, and then we're right back to kind of that strength speed part, and then we're going to keep moving towards the speed part, and we want to move that bar fast and accept the fact that we're really not going to get any stronger. I mean, I think people think they can get super duper strong at the detriment of their speed in the summer, and that was something we used to do.
Now, listening to you talk about that story about the nose guard, kind of put an image in my head of Warren Sapp in the '94 national championship. The Cornhuskers, which I'm a huge Cornhusker fan, they'd finally given him all he could handle. And by the 4th quarter, he had to check himself out of the game, and Nebraska just started rolling. And
and then you can block them one-on-one after you've done that.
So going into your scenario a little bit different with what you run with the buck sweeps and the different things you do, you're pulling guards a lot. You're moving some of the guys that usually don't get out of an acceleration phase. You're getting them out down the line and up into top speed. So to prepare those guys for that, are you constantly adjusting your acceleration phase and trying to get that maybe shorter for some of your linemen so that they can get up to that top speed and move some bodies?
Yeah, I mean, we try to hit. I mean, our week is usually a day of max velocity, and I do it a lot of times on Mondays. I mean, just the way it fits, and I know a lot of people go Tuesdays or later in the week. It's hard to do later in the week, obviously, the Friday football game, and I understand that kids don't always recover on the weekends, but for our guys, we give them Saturday and Sunday off. And so that's what fits best in our schedule. So we hit our max V stuff. We don't even take the field on Monday. That's part of our we're recovering from pads and such. So we hit our top speed, and then Thursday is usually our acceleration day before the game. So we love to record, rank, and publish. So like 5 into 10s, and then we'll start taking the Joe Stikowski 40 profile that he created from the NFL Combine. And we'll say, okay, this is your top speed 5, or top speed 10-yard fly with a 30-yard run in. Can we, this is what it should be in 10 into 10. Can we improve your 10 into 10? And then can we improve your 20 into 10? And then we'll continuously keep hitting those. And then we'll add in Tony Villani's game speed and separation stuff. That's been a big part of our summer. So being able to accelerate after different cuts and changes of direction. And then when we get into practice, Wednesdays is also a quote unquote sprint day for us. So I'll get the timer out and we'll time jet runs. We'll time rocket tosses. We'll time quick pitch. We'll time our double dive stuff where we'll literally put a set of cones up, and our guys will wear a chip and they'll get a handoff and we'll see who can accelerate, and I don't have time to record, rank, and publish that, but I have time to yell it out. And our guys know who won that day on who can. And it gives us an idea. It's like, okay, this guy gets out there faster than anybody else on jet. So we need to make sure we understand that, because maybe he's not as fast as, in a straight line, but on a certain play, holy cow, he's able to hit it really well. And then coach will do the same thing with polls. So he'll set up his polling stuff and he'll time it, or he'll time the tight ends on their what we call POA, or a point of attack, backside tight ends getting to that safety, and we're trying to hit those speeds. Those guys, usually the linemen will just use like a stopwatch or whatever, but we're trying to compete on those days, and we're trying to go as fast as we can instead of this. I think Coach Holler talks about we try to play in 5th gear, but we practice in 3rd gear. At times we're trying to overload or use overspeed in some of that stuff with the timer, and that can be part of a drill progression. So just adding a time component to a drill can change the drill. You start adding, like if you're a spread team and now you're catching a bubble, but right after you catch the bubble is the cone and then you have to accelerate. Well, that adds a component. So now I can't just take my time and catch it, dilly-dally. Well, I'm going to have a slow time, and I don't want to be the slowest guy. So that adds a component there. So, yeah, we work a ton of that, obviously, out of different stances. We do a ton with shin angles with the Corfus stuff. I mean, that's all built into our school curriculum, which is nice because every athlete needs it. I think it was pretty cool, and it was just something that one of our guy that takes a lot of pictures. We're doing tons of shin angle stuff in this phase in the wintertime during basketball. So I'm scrolling through Facebook and looking at these pictures of our recent basketball game, and I'm like, boom. I just start cherry picking. There's just so many pictures of our guys getting to the rim or playing defense, and I mean their shins are almost horizontal and their foot's in these positions and their heels up. And so we got to school the next day and I got the projector out and I'm like, guys, this is why we train this stuff. You don't even realize you're doing this, but this is you getting to the rim and this is your body understanding for me to get by this guy. This is the angle I have to get in. And it was kind of an eye-opening because they had no clue that's what their body was doing. They just know coach said we're going to work on this shin angle stuff on this day. And so it's good to show them those scenarios. And then I think from a top speed standpoint, the next step for us is GPS, but just trying to figure out, the logistics of with a small staff. We don't just want to get it and not have time to look at the data and that stuff. But I think to understand what speeds our guys need to be at for their certain positions. When we have good plays, this is generally where we're at. It's not always about hitting a top speed, but just understanding how many top speed accelerations and different things our guys are getting into a game is a natural progression for us. It's just not something that we've been able to purchase yet, and logistically trying to work that stuff out. But that fits right into the sprint-based football idea.
Man, you're hitting so many cool topics that I'm trying to keep them all sorted, and I want to get into shin angle. But before I go there, you're talking about timing on the field. It's amazing how your preconceived notions will tell you that a kid's slow. And until you put a timer on them, you really don't know. I've been shocked at some of these kids that I just naturally assumed were slow. And then you start looking at their numbers and you're like, that kid's fast. I just had an idea that he should be slow and he's really not. So when you start tracking it, I guess as a coach, it probably opens your eyes up a little bit more on, hey, we can pull on this side. This guard's faster than what we thought he should be. I'd imagine that opens up a new element of coaching for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than big guys that can run. I mean, I think it's kind of a given that your skill guys are generally, we're going to get some pretty decent, unless we totally screw them up, fast guys in the skill positions. But and that's where this season is going to be kind of unique for us because we graduated a 6'3", 320-pound, really good 3-year starter, and we graduated a 6 foot, 250-pound, two-way honorable mention all-state guy. And we really, at the varsity level, now we got some young guys that might step up. Almost every one of our guys is going to be between 175 and 205, with a lot of guys in that 180 to 205 range that are going to play up front. So that's going to be something, a lot of times our guards are that size, but not usually our tackles. So it's going to be interesting because we're going to be super fast and explosive, but we're going to play some teams that are really big, and it's going to be kind of a clash of just size and so forth. We don't have this really big nose that we've generally had, so we're going to have to get a little bit more creative there. But I'm kind of excited because I think it's going to be fun to watch our guys really get off the ball. We're going to be able to go fast. Trying to figure out how to keep them fresh and subbing in them out are going to be interesting. But it's just a different dynamic that we haven't had this many guys in that range, that literally we're trying to sort through whether a guy's going to play a wing back at 190 pounds, a fullback, a guard, or a tight end, which is an awesome problem to have. And I don't think it'll be till later in the year that we really kind of figure out exactly what best fits. But we're going to try to figure out how to get our best 11 on the field and then rotate them. But it's going to be interesting because we're going to have a lot of those guys. So I imagine we will do a lot more of getting those guys in space, as the season goes on.
Now, I deal with a lot of undersized guys. I don't know, for whatever reason, where I live, it seems like all these guys are just a smaller guy that you're putting into attack on a guard position. So I guess that comes into something I have watched in some of your videos. You start talking about mass specific. So if you're going to have a 170 or 180 pound guard, he better be pretty good at moving whatever's in front of him. So creating the strength and explosiveness you need, how are you able to do that through your weight room?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously that was a Brian Kula through, oh man, the Underground Secrets of
Yeah, that's
Barry Ross.
Barry
Yeah.
Ross. That's one of Louis Simmons's favorite books. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was at TFC Chicago, and JT Ayers also are all kind of involved in that. So we do hex bar deadlift. We don't straight bar deadlift just for efficiency and positioning. I'm not. That's about kind of where it starts and stops with me on bilateral stuff. We did front squat this summer. We will do some of that. But from a brain standpoint, and this is the Chris Corfus, Dan Fichter stuff, the brain's not hugely fond of bilateral things. You can do some neuro tests and then get into a bilateral squat and then do again and watch, weakness. And then you go right into march or just stagger your feet a little bit and boom, it comes right back. So we will do just in terms of being able to move more mass in the safest fashion, but we have not back squatted since COVID. Before COVID, we were doing some heavy kind of quarter squat stuff, but most of the stuff that we do is split squat and or hex bar deads. We throw a lot of med balls. We do a lot of weighted jumps. We do a lot of altitude drops. Double jumps are big. And it's just something that I missed out on a lot whenever you put a barbell on your back. So this is something that Corfus has kind of, I guess, beat into my head through all my stuff. But, the difference between the guy that has to have this big counter of movement to go, whether that's in a vertical jump or they really have to always load up to go, is not usually the best athlete. Now they might have solid weight room numbers. They might have a good vertical. But the guy that can just go, doesn't have to have a counter movement, is the guy that can deal the best with the slack in his system because, our muscles are in slack and then we have to, tighten in order to move. Well, if we always have a bar on our back, for example, when we're always squatting, the bar is taking up the slack. So as soon as we get under a bar, the brain needs to feel safe. And so that slack is taken up. Well, that's great. But once we get out on the field, we don't have a bar on our back anymore. We have to go out of a stance. And so it's not, you can squat, and I'm not saying you can't squat. Obviously, there's lots of benefits to it, but you can't always live in that realm. And I think for a long time, that's all we did. So we do tons of double jumps and different stiffness things because we want our guys to be able to go. We teach ankle rocker squats, and we'll do just quick jumps and different things. And we really try to focus not just on our guys' vertical jump numbers, but how fast they're able to be able to jump. And I did a presentation for our state association. It was a guy that could jump 30 and our all-stater that could jump 28. And the guy that jumped 30 would do almost a complete full squat and jump 30. And the guy that jumped 28 would jump 28 in about 0.1 second. He would just go. And he was the all-state guy. The other guy never cleared. I don't think he ever cleared 5.6 in the high jump. And so you got to figure out what you want. And so you got to be able to hit those qualities on top of your strength work that I think sometimes when push comes to shove, we're going to send guys into the weight room and not worry about how they move and their explosiveness and things like that, and just expect that the strength box will check everything else. More force, more force. As long as we get more force, then we're going to move better. Well, force into what? Force with a bar on our back? Well, that's fine, but what's that doing to our spine? What's that doing to, our body's ability to deal with slack? What about when we get on one leg? Because I've squatted a lot of weight on two. I can't squat 225 in a split squat. And you would pick me about dead last on a team right now. But I could go in there and out squat on two legs any of our guys in the weight room. And I can out bench them all. But again, you're not going to pick me on there. I can't throw a med ball as far as our guys, but I can outbench them. So there's different qualities that you look for. It's not all about force. It's the ability to have that rate of force development, all those different qualities. And that's kind of the nuance of, how much strength work, how much explosive work, how you marrying the two. If you do a bilateral exercise, what kind of single leg or cross crawl pattern can we do right after to bring that function back and so forth. And those are things that I'm constantly learning from Dan and Chris and those guys. And we don't worry about, getting back to maybe I went around the question, the mass specific stuff. We don't worry about trying to add size to our guys and all that. I think some people get so focused that the weight room is what's going to build all their size, and it's really what they eat. I mean, if the kids eat junk food, they're not going to gain weight. And your body, and this is something that I've learned from Corfus, and it holds true. I mean, our body has a fighting weight. So one of our best, our anchor in track, he decided that on the off season he's going to eat a lot. He want to get big. So in the winter, because he had to play tackle at the end of last year, and he was about maybe 159 last year. So he got up to like 175, 176, and it wasn't too long into track. And he's like, man, coach, I'm down. He was already back down to like 168, 169. His brain knew that for him to be successful and move the way he needed to, that he was way too heavy. Once track got over, now he's up to 180. I guarantee you a couple weeks into football, he'll be back closer to 170 because his body is going to figure out what its fighting weight is. And so this kind of artificial weight and all these things that we all want to put on, you're not going to really do that in the weight room. And that's where people start then adding in all of this volume and think, well, if we just do all this work and all this volume, our guys will get bigger. I think sometimes that's a fool's errand.
I would agree with that. And then, they try to add a bunch of stuff in the weight room to get them bigger. And then at no point do they ever talk to them about food or make allowances for them to have food. They just hope this magical pill is going to fix it sometimes maybe, and that's just not the case. I mean, you were talking earlier about your pie chart, and you've got sleep and you have nutrition, and you're trying to force all of that in so that you have recovered athletes. How are you able to make sure that your kids are getting food in and getting rest in that you can control? I mean, is that something you guys just preach, or do you have a system that you work on? What do you guys do?
Yeah. So, we're always trying to come up with, better ways to do that. Obviously we do the Thursday night team meal. Or if we're playing on Saturday morning, we will do that. We started this year what we call 2 Slice Tuesday. So every Tuesday coming off the practice field, our guys are able to get at least 2 slices. We have local businesses that most all of them pick it up. I set a table up outside our locker room and they drop it off. We come off the practice field and there's 13, 14, 15 pizzas sitting there for our guys. We want to try to do something else on Wednesdays. And then really after talking to Kyle Bolton, he did some presentations with TCU football, just about all the applesauce pouches and the quick carbs and things that they have on their sidelines in practice and games and such. We do that at halftime, but we don't do it in practice. And that's something that I really want to look into this year, giving our guys, in that time slot. Because, I mean, if you're in school all day and you eat lunch at 11:30 and it's now 4:30 and you're trying to finish practice strong, that's a long time in between there. And sometimes we just need something. Then I listened to Corfus do a podcast that I can't remember if it was with you or no, I think it was with Joel Smith, but he said his whole goal at track meets was to get his guys to continue to eat things. When was the last time you ate? No, go get some, Sour Patch Kids, go get this. And that was his whole focus. And obviously Homewood Flossmoor dominated the 3A track and field, but that was his whole focus this year of a track meet, not on how his guys were warming up or practicing handoffs. It was all about making sure that they were getting, at that point on a game day, obviously not super high quality. But I always tell our guys, you should be eating things that you cannot throw in the microwave the first time. So if it's something that you can throw in there the first time, it's probably not worth the darn for you, right? You should have to actually cook it. And then, one last story about that really kind of got us onto this is, I think it was in 2019, we were super stagnant coming out of halftime. and we're trying to come up with some solutions because we didn't feel like we were playing very well. We talked to some of our seniors on the team, and some of them said, "Well, coach, we get in halftime and we just we sit outside and everyone gets kind of cold, and we haven't had anything to eat, and then we have this team meeting and then we go." So from that point on, we started bringing our guys in because our locker room's kind of far away, so we just kind of stand outside our weight room. Now we bring them in the weight room. We have fruit, usually Hershey bars, some type of quick carb, Gatorade. We have all that stuff for them at halftime now. So we let them get in there, get a little bit of food and all that stuff. So we started doing that, and it's like, okay, we do that for games, but that's not something that we've done in any of our practices. So that was kind of a light bulb moment this off season of, we've got girls that want to do manager stuff anyway, and that could just be another thing. We have this little tent set up with some of these quick carb things that our guys can have, because obviously we want them to be at their best, because that anytime that they're in that fatigue state, or that's when injuries can happen and things like that. And so yeah, that's something. And so yeah, I mean, we obviously don't have a budget that TCU has, so we'll have to work through some of that stuff. But we've got some pretty awesome businesses around that we're going to continue to come up with ways, and that's part of the performance space that somebody say, "Oh, come on, they're kids, they'd be able to get through practice. We did this, or we didn't get water when we played," and it's like, yeah, but we're smarter than that now, and if that's what gives our kids the best chance to have a great practice, then that's what we want to do. And so that's shifting, whether you call it feed the cats football, sprint based football, performance based football, but it's actually thinking about how they perform in a game and not just trying to kill them in practice, so to speak, and sometimes literally, obviously, in some cases throughout history.
Now, you were talking about quick carbs. I don't know if you've ever thought about this. I was lucky enough that I was able to talk to Justin Harris, and Justin Harris is just absolutely amazing. But he is a big proponent of waxy maize, and you could throw that in a Gatorade. It's about 40 grams of carbs, and it does not have to be digested. It actually goes straight into the bloodstream. So like on a short halftime, yeah, you got the food sitting there that's eventually going to kick in, but right, some waxy maize and some Gatorade, by the time you hit your next warm-ups, it's rolling. I mean, your blood, it's like an intro workout essentially, is what it boils down to. So,
yeah, honey is another one, I think, those are all things that definitely we want to make sure that we're a little bit more cognizant of some of those things throughout the year, and not just games, or making sure that we're giving our kids the best chance to be successful. Because if even if it's a home game and they leave school at 3 and we have them back here by 5, and they go home and they eat something at 3:45, when the game's on the line, it's probably 8:45. That's 5 hours since the last time. And, so those are the things that you have to think about it if you want to give your guys the best chance to be successful. And that's what we're about. I always tell our guys, my biggest fear is we're going to get in a game and we're not going to be prepared, and you guys aren't going to be successful because of some situation that we as coaches put you in or didn't put you in and didn't have you prepared. And I never want them to leave the program and say, man, if we had better coaches, we would have been way better. And so that's a driving force of mine. It has nothing to do about wins, losses, and whatever. I want our kids to play. I shared with them this morning. So I put my little mini camp practice plan. I found my sleeve from last year, and right there was, practice 68, November 23rd. It was our last practice on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And I said, guys, that was the last time we had a helmet on. And I said, that was kind of fun to play all 16 weeks of practice and say that we got to practice every single possible day we could have. And we made some great memories in the snow and the cold, and, win losses aside, we had a ton of great memories, and that's what it's all about. And that's happy, healthy athletes. I mean, that's what we want. We don't want this, let's try to turn boys into men stuff. They'll do it in the right scenarios with the right coaching and the right leadership. They'll become men in the right ways, and not through some, crazy militaristic style.
Yeah, that was one of the things on one of your YouTube videos I watched, 10 mistakes football coaches make, something like that. And you talked about punitive punishment. So that was how for years and years and years respect was built, or a certain culture was built. So by taking that out, how do you create the culture of respect and everything being on task like you want, without that old style mentality of, well, I'll just run them until they do what I want them to do?
Well, I think it starts with treating the athletes like people. If the athletes feel respected more than just a football player, I think that's a big thing. If they know you love them, if you tell them when you screw up, if you're mindful of their time, if they know, hey, guys, we're going to be done with practice. I always joke in track. It's kind of one of my recruiting pitches. Hey, come out for track because we're going to be done with track practice before the baseball and softball team's even done with their arm warm up. So we're always up front and intentional with why we're doing things, why we don't do things. And we want the athletes to understand, so we were trying to feed them as much as we can. And so we try to really make it all about them. And I think it's got to start there, right? If the athletes don't respect you or don't think you care at all about them, then, they're not going to care if they miss this, that, or the other, or they let you down. But if they know you care about them, then they don't want to let you down. Now, I'd love to say that because they don't want to let you down, they don't ever screw up, but kids are kids. And they're going to do something stupid in a classroom. They're going to do something stupid sometimes on a bus. They're going to do something stupid in a locker room because they're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. And we've all done stupid stuff. So you've got to have something in place to redirect them, I guess, so to speak. And so usually it starts with a conversation, and it's one that I have. What happened? And I've gotten better at that because normally my first response is if a teacher comes to me and said, so-and-so did X, Y, and Z in my class, I want to go. I mean, I'm ready to flip, handle, scream, what do you think you're blah, blah, blah. Well, there's always two sides to the story, and sometimes things aren't as they appear. So asking what happened. Most of the time, the kids will say, I was being okay, that was really stupid. And it depends where it is, right? If it's something small that we can correct, it's the first time, then we'll say, hey, that's not how we do things, right? If you're getting in trouble in there, that means, you're letting our guys down here. If I can't trust you in the classroom, I can't trust you on the field. And, we've got to make sure that the guys that are playing now are the guys that we know are going to be there when the playoffs roll around. And we have those conversations. And it says, let's not let that happen again. Okay. Obviously it's a major violation. It's a major violation. Then you let the athletic code deal with that. But then if it progresses, then the best way to do is to send them home, sit them, because that's the only way, in my opinion, that it's going to have any teeth to it. Making everybody else run is, when they didn't cause any issues, is counterproductive to the whole scenario. So we take the opportunity to perform away in some fashion, and we don't do it right away, and we don't, we don't have like a specific half game, quarter. It depends on the situation, depends on the character of the kid. Is this a one-off mistake? Is this something that has been happening? Is it consistent? And then sometimes you give a kid, and I'm guilty of giving too many chances because I know how football can save a kid from, if they lose football, then they're going to probably lose a lot of things. Their grades are probably going to slip. I don't know what they're going to start doing after school, all those types of things. So I know I've been guilty of giving too many chances. I'll give you a story. That same 2017 season where we kind of switched things, we had a kid that had gotten in trouble a few times. He wasn't a starter, but he was a junior, and I kind of had to give him, hey, man, I've given you a lot of chances. You can't have any more screw-ups this season or you can't be on the team anymore. And I think right in the first round of the playoffs, he had another one. And I had to kick him off. And I mean, it sucked. That's the worst part of coaching when you have to do that. But I had given him so many chances. Okay, so we kicked him off. Rolls around to later that spring. And he wants to come and talk. And he and I sit down that spring and we lay out some things. Okay, these are things that happened last year. They can't this year because he's like, Coach, I want to come back to football, all these different things. We had a conversation. We talked about things he can and can't do. This is our expectations. and he ended up starting at right guard that whole year, and we played for the state championship. And there was a picture of he and I hugging, and we got beat bad. We did not play well in the state championship game. Forreston was really good. Didn't matter. But there was an embrace that we had on the field. And I remember saying, this is why you got your stuff together, because you got an opportunity to be in this moment. And he learned a ton. Now, he had to go through a hard time. I didn't make the other team run. He had enough chances that I eventually had to kick him off the team. But he learned from it, and he came back and didn't have any issues his senior year. He grew up a little bit. Kids make mistakes. I mean, Coach Holler talks about educational-based sports, and that's what school sports are. And he learned a lesson, and he thrived from it, and he had a great senior year that culminated in a chance to play in the school's first state championship. And it was just a great story, but it wasn't, his junior year. But we worked through that, but I had to make a hard decision. So sometimes you got to do that. But that I could have ran him into the ground, and it wouldn't have changed those behaviors.
No, and it would have made the rest of the team resent him, where maybe the way you handled it, they could see that you were serious about what you said, but then it gave him a chance to develop. I think sometimes maybe we hold 16, 17-year-old kids to this standard of an adult that they don't even know what it is sometimes.
Right.
I mean, if I was held to that, some of the standards that we hold kids to now, today, if I was held to that standard in high school, I probably wouldn't even have got through.
Well, you go to some coaching clinics and things like that, and you look at some of the behaviors that happen, of the same guys that are holding those standards. I mean, it's there are things that happen in some of those situations, and then go back and preach something different. And I understand they're two different things, but sometimes football coaches are the worst hypocrites in some of those scenarios, and we've got to use the game to teach and create leaders. And sometimes it's putting an arm around a kid and giving them a second chance. Sometimes you have to do, you got to suspend them a game, to kick them out of practice, kick them off the team. Those things, sometimes they get to that point and those decisions suck and they keep you up at night, way more than an X and O decision. But, as long as you got the interest of your program and the kid at heart, I mean, that's all you can do.
Well, I know you got big plans this week, and you've went to school, so you're out of the house to do this podcast, and I appreciate that. So I wanted to get back to shin angles, and then I'll kind of wrap this up. I was watching one of your videos, and you were showing your athletes doing a falling start, and it really changed the way I started looking at it now. You, on top of having them fall forward, it seemed like maybe you had them fall in their knees also to drop that shin angle down to a really steep degree. Is that a Corfus thing? Where did you kind of come up with adding that little aspect to it?
I remember Corfus talking about a 0-step projection, which made a lot of sense to me as once I got into track. Is like, you talk about low man wins. It's really not. It's low shin angles wins, or low hips, whatever you want to say, because the guys that just bend over at the waist, that have a bent over waist and their shins are vertical up and down, aren't going to move anybody. And so what he talked about with 0-step was, how far can you get your hip clearance before your foot ever hits the ground? And that's horizontal acceleration, not stepping out and your hips stay behind, but projecting. Well, the only way you're going to project out, right? If an O lineman projects out of his stance, that's a hell of a lot better, in my opinion, than saying that he fired out. If you're projecting out, you are moving horizontally. And so the only way you're going to do that is to try to create horizontal force. And the track runners that can keep those shin angles for a long time can accelerate very, very well. And the ones that can't are already upright in their second or third step. And so we want to be very mindful of really kind of over exaggerating those shin angles, especially early on when we're teaching that. We in the very beginning, we may do some things against the wall just to teach some force in that, but we try to get away from that wall, because nothing that we ever do has a stable upper body. And what's the wall do? It creates a stable upper body, when in reality, and this is a Fichter thing, is the more unstable your upper body is, the more stable your lower body has to be. So we try to add different things to their upper body to challenge it: water bags, hands overhead, sticks above their head, to work on those different things. And obviously, sleds, pushing, pulling, those sometimes are logistically tough with a large team. but we try to mix those in. I like doing ISO starts too, where we'll take these old heavy jump ropes and the guys will hold the handles and the other guys will hold them back like a harness. And we'll allow our guys to get in an isometric position, like a perfect start, where if they let go and they don't go, they're going to fall on their face. And then they drop it and go from there. We like to progress there. And then eventually I want to get a shred mill, because you talk to Brad Fortney and you talk to these guys that have those, that kind of corrects this ability to put horizontal force in the ground, and it corrects those shin angles, because and this is another, it's really a Franz Bosch thing, but I've heard Chris and Dan talk a lot about, I'm not going to be able to tell you how to correct something. I have to create a drill that the success or failure of that drill is what teaches the body what to do. And so that's what we have to try to do. We have to make whatever position that your body likes to be in that isn't correct, we have to somehow make it not like that. In other words, I'm going to fall, I'm going to step wrong, I'm going to do this. And so the body has to kind of self-correct. And so we'll start there with some of those basic, just simple shin drop stuff. And then we'll progress those into some isometric holds. And then obviously then we'll start, with one knee on the ground, the other knee on the ground. And we'll go through a whole kind of progression. And all that time we're timing to see, in those 5 into 10s, 10 into 10s, is it working? Are we progressing? And then build into, pushing a sled, pulling, doing, those different things to keep working on horizontal force.
Well, Coach, I think I got through all my questions. I appreciate all the time you give me. I know summer is hectic for you, but anytime I can do anything to help you out, please let me know. And thanks again for coming on.
All right. Thanks. I enjoyed it. Appreciate it.